The police officer's flashlight swept across our front porch while my mother stood frozen in the driveway, her designer luggage still in her hands. Her face went white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind her, the taxi driver awkwardly asked if she still needed help with her bags. She didn't answer. She couldn't, because what she was seeing, what she was finally being forced to see, was something she never expected. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, back to the morning that changed everything. The morning my own mother handed me $30 and a bottle of water and disappeared for the entire summer. My name is Kristen Harrison. I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school, and I thought I knew what hard times looked like. I was wrong. I had no idea what was coming. My mother, Valerie, had always been the kind of woman who needed a man like she needed oxygen. My father left when I was 7, and my little brother Nolan was just a baby. I barely remember him. What I do remember is the parade of boyfriends that followed. There was the car salesman who stayed for 8 months, the accountant who lasted a year, the fitness instructor who moved in for 3 weeks and ate all our food before disappearing with our microwave. Yes, our microwave. I still don't understand that one. Through it all, I raised myself. And when Nolan came along, I raised him too. Mom was always too busy chasing her next romantic adventure to notice that her kids needed things like, dinner, or clean clothes, or someone to show up to parent-teacher conferences. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for Boyd Carpenter. Mom met Boyd online in April, wealthy, charming, from Vancouver. Within weeks, she was flying to see him every other weekend, staying longer each time, leaving me a few dollars to handle things. By June, I knew this one was different. She talked about him like he was a prince from a fairy tale. She was completely obsessed. Then came July 3rd. That morning started with a sound I'll never forget. Suitcases rolling across the hallway floor. Not the small overnight bags she usually took, the big ones, the kind you pack when you're not coming back anytime soon. I found her in the kitchen, dressed like she was heading to a resort, full makeup at 7 in the morning. Nolan was at the table eating cereal, still half asleep. He was 11 years old and had no idea his summer was about to become a nightmare. Mom didn't even look at me when she explained. Boyd had invited her to spend the summer at his cabin in British Columbia. 2 weeks, maybe 3. She'd be back before I knew it. It would be fine. I was an adult now, wasn't I? I had just graduated. I could handle things. Then she put $30 on the counter. $30 and 1 bottle of water. I still don't know what the water bottle was about. Maybe she thought it was funny. Maybe she thought it was symbolic. Maybe she just grabbed it from the fridge as an afterthought. But there it was, a single bottle of water sitting next to 2 $10 bills and 2 5s, like we were contestants on some twisted survival show where the only prize was not starving. Nolan looked at me with those big eyes of his. He was 11, just a kid, and I could see him doing the math in his head, the same math I was doing. $30, 2 people, an entire summer. I tried to argue. I tried to explain that rent was due in 10 days, that we barely had any food in the refrigerator, that Nolan needed supplies for summer activities, that you cannot leave 2 kids alone with grocery money and call it parenting. But Mom was already checking her phone, already smiling at whatever message Boyd had just sent her. She told me I was being dramatic. She told me to get a job if I needed money. She told me this was her chance at happiness, and I should be supportive instead of selfish. Selfish. She actually called me selfish. The taxi honked outside. Mom grabbed her bags, kissed Nolan on the head without really looking at him, and told us she'd call when she landed. Then she was gone. Just like that. The door closed, and the house went quiet. Nolan didn't cry right away. He just stared at the $30 on the counter, like he was trying to make it multiply through sheer willpower. I wished I had that superpower. I wished I had any superpower at all. That first night after Nolan fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and counted the money again. $30. Our refrigerator had half a carton of eggs, some questionable leftover pasta, a few condiments, and a lot of empty space. The rent, $850, was due on July 13th. The electricity bill was sitting unopened on the counter. I hadn't even looked at it yet. I was afraid to. I tried calling Mom around 9 o'clock. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking her to call me back, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to sound as scared as I felt. She didn't call back that night, or the next morning, or the morning after that. By day 3, I realized she wasn't going to. Some people have savings accounts for emergencies. Some people have family they can call. Some people have safety nets. We had $30, a bottle of water that was now empty, and each other. I looked at my little brother sleeping on the couch, still in his clothes from the day before because I'd been too exhausted to remind him to change. He trusted me. He believed I would figure this out. He had no idea that I was 18 years old and absolutely terrified. But here's the thing about being terrified. You can either let it crush you or you can let it fuel you. And I had an 11-year-old counting on me. So I made a decision that night. I was going to find a way to survive this summer. I was going to keep a roof over our heads and food in our stomachs. And when my mother finally came back from her romantic vacation, she was going to see exactly what her children were capable of. She just had no idea what that would actually look like. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment, I see everything, and your support means the world to me. Thank you so much. Now, back to the story. Day 4 started with me staring at our pantry like it might magically refill itself overnight. Spoiler alert, and it didn't. We had peanut butter, half a loaf of bread that was getting stale, some generic pasta, and exactly 1 can of tomato sauce. I did the math. If we ate small portions, this could maybe stretch another 2 days. Maybe. I made Nolan a peanut butter sandwich for breakfast and told him it was a special summer adventure. He didn't believe me. The kid was 11, not stupid, but he ate it without complaining. That broke my heart more than anything. He was already learning to expect less. By day 5, the $30 was gone. I'd spent the last of it on milk, bread, and a bag of rice. Rice, I figured, could stretch forever. My grandmother used to say that rice was the great equalizer. Rich or poor, everyone eats rice. Of course, she also used to say that hard work always pays off, and I was starting to have doubts about that one. I started looking for work immediately. You'd think finding a job in July would be easy. Summer jobs everywhere, right? Wrong. Every fast food place, every retail store, every business within walking distance had already hired their summer staff back in May. I was too late. The manager at the grocery store actually laughed when I asked if they were hiring. Not in a mean way, just in a, honey, where were you 2 months ago way. It still stung. So I got creative. My first job was cleaning out Mrs. Delgado's garage 3 houses down. She'd been meaning to organize it for years, and when I knocked on her door offering to do it for $20, she looked at me like I'd offered her a winning lottery ticket. 8 hours later, I had $20, a sunburn, and the knowledge that Mrs. Delgado had kept every single newspaper since 1987. I didn't ask why. Some questions don't need answers. Day 7 brought a new problem. A bright orange notice taped to our front door. Mr. Kowalski, our landlord, was not a patient man. He had a thick Polish accent and a mustache that seemed to bristle with its own separate anger. The notice gave us 7 days to pay the rent or face eviction proceedings. 7 days. $850. I had exactly $20 and a sunburn. I called my mother 12 times that week. Each call went to voicemail. By the 8th call, the voicemail was full. By the 10th call, I realized I'd been blocked. My own mother had blocked my number while I was trying to tell her that her children might end up homeless. I tried not to think about what that meant. I had work to do. The car wash on Henderson Avenue was hiring day laborers. No experience necessary. Cash at the end of each shift. I showed up at 6 in the morning and didn't leave until 7 at night. The pay was $65 for the week, and I earned every penny. I learned things about the inside of strangers' cars that I never wanted to know. There was a French fry in one minivan that I'm pretty sure was old enough to vote. Another car had so many dog hairs that I sneezed for 3 hours straight. But I kept showing up, kept scrubbing, kept smiling at customers who looked right through me. Meanwhile, Nolan was supposed to start summer camp that week. The deposit was $40. Money we obviously didn't have. He told me it was fine, that he didn't really want to go anyway. But I heard him crying in his room that night. One of the kids from the neighborhood had made fun of him for wearing the same shorts 3 days in a row, called him poor, called him dirty. My little brother, who had done nothing wrong, who was just trying to survive the same impossible situation I was. I wanted to find that kid and give him a piece of my mind. Instead, I went into my closet and pulled out my prom dress. It was pale blue, floor length, the nicest thing I'd ever owned. I'd saved for 6 months to buy it. I'd felt like a princess wearing it. The consignment shop gave me $35 for it. I told myself it was just a dress. I told myself it didn't matter. But walking out of that shop, I felt like I'd sold a piece of myself, a piece of the girl I used to be before this summer turned me into someone harder. Day 9 brought another piece of mail, a warning from the electric company. Payment overdue. Service interruption in 14 days. I added it to the pile of things I couldn't afford to think about. By day 10, our refrigerator held nothing but condiments, ketchup, mustard, a jar of pickles, and something in a container that I was too scared to open. Nolan made a joke about having a condiment feast, and I laughed even though I wanted to cry. That kid had more resilience than anyone I knew. He definitely didn't get it from our mother. That night, I sat in the shower with the water running and cried until I had nothing left. I couldn't let Nolan see me break down. I was supposed to be the strong one. I was supposed to have answers. But I was 18 years old, exhausted, broke, and completely alone. Mr. Kowalski came by again, his mustache twitching with every word. 3 days left, he said. 3 days to pay or start packing. He wasn't cruel about it. I could tell he felt bad. But business was business. He had his own bills to pay. Mrs. Pritchard from next door watched the whole conversation from her porch, not even pretending to mind her own business. That woman knew everyone's secrets and shared them freely. By the next morning, half the neighborhood would know that the Harrison kids were about to be evicted. The thought made me sick. I walked to clear my head that night, just wandering the streets with no destination in mind. That's when I passed Martinelli's Italian restaurant, right as they were closing up. A busboy was hauling trash bags to the dumpster out back, and something made me stop and watch. The bags weren't filled with garbage. They were filled with food. Bread, pasta, vegetables, containers of sauce, all perfectly good, all being thrown away because the restaurant couldn't sell day-old items. I stood there watching bag after bag go into that dumpster, and something shifted inside me. Not hope, not yet, but the beginning of an idea. And that idea was about to change everything. I approached the busboy before I could talk myself out of it. He was young, maybe my age, with tired eyes and marinara sauce stains on his apron. I asked him straight out, "Was that food still good?" He shrugged and said, "Yeah, most of it was fine. They just couldn't serve it tomorrow. Health code stuff, liability stuff, restaurant policy stuff. Every night, same thing. Hundreds of dollars of perfectly edible food straight into the trash." My stomach growled loud enough for both of us to hear. He looked at me for a long moment, then glanced back at the restaurant door, then handed me 2 of the bags without a word. I thanked him probably 15 times. He just nodded and went back inside. I practically ran home with those bags. When I spread everything out on our kitchen table, Nolan's eyes went wide. Fresh bread, only a day old. Pasta that just needed reheating. Vegetables that had a few soft spots but were perfectly fine. Containers of soup and sauce. It was more food than we'd seen in days. Nolan ate until his stomach hurt. I had to tell him to slow down, afraid he'd make himself sick. That night, for the first time in over a week, we went to bed with full bellies. But here's the thing. One meal doesn't solve anything. I knew those bags would last us a few days at most, and then we'd be right back where we started. So my brain started working on something bigger. The next morning, I walked to the public library because our internet had been shut off 3 days earlier. Apparently, you need to pay bills for services to continue. Revolutionary concept. I spent hours researching food waste, food rescue organizations, and something I'd never heard of before, food recovery programs. Turns out, restaurants throw away millions of pounds of perfectly good food every single year. Not because it's bad, but because of policies, liability concerns, and the simple fact that they make too much. And there were organizations across the country that collected this food and distributed it to people who needed it. Legal organizations, legitimate operations. All it took was proper agreements and liability waivers. I spent so much time on Google that week that the algorithm probably thought I was either starting a restaurant or enrolling in culinary school. It kept suggesting chef hats and cooking classes. If only it knew I was just trying to figure out how not to starve. I printed out everything I could find. Sample liability waivers, food safety guidelines, information about similar programs in other cities. My stack of papers was thick and messy, but it felt like possibility. The problem was, I was an 18-year-old nobody. Why would any restaurant listen to me? That's when I found Mr. Okonkwo. Leonard Okonkwo ran the community center on Maple Street. He was a retired high school teacher, 72 years old, with a voice like warm coffee and a handshake that could crush walnuts. Everyone in the neighborhood knew him. More importantly, everyone trusted him. I walked into his community center on day 12 with my stack of printed papers and a speech I'd rehearsed 17 times in the mirror. I told him everything about my mother leaving, about the $30, about the food I'd seen being thrown away, about my idea to collect it and share it with people who needed it. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me for what felt like forever. Then he smiled. He told me I had a good heart but a messy plan. He said success was like his mother's stew. You need patience, the right ingredients, and you have to keep stirring or everything burns to the bottom. But he also said he'd seen worse ideas succeed because someone believed in them hard enough. The key, he explained, was structure. People trusted structure. If I wanted restaurants to give me their extra food, I needed to look legitimate. I needed proper paperwork, a system, a plan for distribution. I couldn't just show up with a shopping bag and good intentions. So we worked together. He helped me refine my liability waiver. The one I'd found online was good, but Mr. Okonkwo knew how to make it sound official. He taught me how to approach business owners, how to present myself as professional and capable, even though I felt like a kid playing dress-up. He let me use the community center as my base of operations and promised that any food I collected could be distributed there to people who needed it. By day 13, I had a real plan. I also had 3 days until eviction and exactly $43 to my name. I went back to Martinelli's, but this time I didn't go to the back door. I walked in through the front entrance during the afternoon lull and asked to speak with the owner. Mrs. Martinelli was in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen everything and were impressed by nothing. She'd owned that restaurant for 31 years. Her husband had started it before that. She'd survived recessions, health inspections, and 3 different construction projects that blocked her front entrance. She was not easily convinced. I handed her my proposal, handwritten on notebook paper because I couldn't afford to print anything else. I explained my idea. I showed her the liability waiver. I told her about the community center, about Mr. Okonkwo, about the families in our neighborhood who could use the food her restaurant was throwing away every single night. She looked at my proposal for a long time. Then she looked at me. She asked how old I was. I said 18. She asked where my parents were. I hesitated, then told the truth. My mother had left me with $30 2 weeks ago and hadn't come back. I was trying to keep myself and my little brother alive. Something shifted in Mrs. Martinelli's face. Not pity exactly. She didn't seem like the pitying type. More like recognition, like she remembered being young and desperate and doing whatever it took. She agreed. 1 week trial. If it went well, we could continue. If there was a single complaint, a single problem, we were done. I thanked her so many times she actually told me to stop and go home before I thanked the words right out of myself. I practically floated out of that restaurant. That same afternoon, Mr. Kowalski showed up for what I expected to be our eviction notice. Instead, he stood on our porch and studied me like I was a puzzle he couldn't figure out. He'd heard about what I was doing. Mrs. Pritchard's gossip machine was actually useful for once. He'd heard I was trying to help people. His mustache did that twitching thing it always did. Then he told me he'd give us 30 more days. Not out of charity. He was quick to clarify, but because he respected hard workers. His parents came to this country with nothing and built a life through hard work. He recognized that spirit. 30 more days. It wasn't a solution, but it was time. And time was everything. That night, Nolan asked me if things were going to be okay. I looked at my little brother, who had been so brave through everything, who had never once blamed me or complained even when things were at their worst. I told him yes, and for the first time since Mom had left, I actually believed it. What I didn't know was that our story was just beginning. The hardest parts were still ahead, but so were the most incredible moments I could have ever imagined, including the one where my mother's face finally showed up on our doorstep and found something she never expected waiting for her. The first official night of what I was now calling my food rescue operation happened on day 14. I showed up at Martinelli's back door at exactly 10 o'clock with borrowed coolers from Mr. Okonkwo and a nervous energy that made my hands shake. The same busboy from before, his name was Thomas, I'd learned, had everything ready. 3 bags of bread, 2 containers of pasta, vegetables sorted and clean, and a tray of lasagna that hadn't sold that evening. I loaded everything into the coolers like I was handling treasure, because to me, it was. The next morning, I set up at the community center at 7. Mr. Okonkwo had spread the word through his network. Retired teachers, church friends, neighbors he'd known for decades. By 8 o'clock, there was a line of people waiting. Elderly folks on fixed incomes. Single mothers with kids hanging off their arms. A veteran in a wheelchair who hadn't had a hot meal in 3 days. I handed out food until there was nothing left, and something happened that I didn't expect. People thanked me. Not just polite thank yous, but real gratitude. One woman, Mrs. Patterson, grabbed my hands and told me I was an angel. I wasn't an angel. I was just a desperate teenager who had stumbled onto something bigger than herself. By the end of that first week, word had spread beyond Mr. Okonkwo's network. People were showing up that I'd never seen before. The demand was growing, but my supply was still just one restaurant. So I expanded. Golden Dragon Buffet was my second partner. Mr. Wei, the owner, was skeptical at first. His English wasn't perfect, and I think he was worried about liability issues. But when I showed him the waiver, now properly typed and printed thanks to the library's free computer access, he nodded slowly. Buffett's, he explained, had even more waste than regular restaurants. Food couldn't sit out for more than a certain time. Health code rules. Every night he threw away enough to feed 30 people. Not anymore. Sunrise Bakery came next. The owner, a cheerful woman named Patricia Holloway, actually cried when I explained what I was doing. Her grandmother had grown up during the Depression, she said. The idea of throwing away good bread while people went hungry had always bothered her. She'd just never known there was another option. Nolan became my right-hand man, my CFO, he called himself, Chief Food Organizer. He took the job incredibly seriously, even made himself a little name tag out of cardboard and marker. Every afternoon, he'd help me sort donations, organize the distribution schedule, and keep inventory of what we had. The kid was 11 years old and running logistics better than most adults I knew. By day 25, I had 6 restaurant partners and was feeding over 40 families a week. The community center had become a hub of activity. Volunteers started showing up, people who wanted to help, people who had been helped, and wanted to give back. Mr. Okonkwo coordinated everything with the calm efficiency of a man who had spent 30 years managing teenagers. Even Mrs. Pritchard stopped gossiping and started volunteering. I didn't fully trust her yet. Old habits die hard. But she showed up every morning to help sort bread, and she hadn't spread a single rumor in days. People can surprise you sometimes. Then came day 30. I was in the middle of organizing a delivery when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, except it wasn't unknown. It was my mother's new Canadian phone. The message was brief and brutal. Having an amazing time. Boyd proposed, wedding in September. Don't bother me with drama. That was it. No questions about how we were doing. No apology for disappearing. No acknowledgement that she'd left her children with $30 and a bottle of water a month ago. Just an announcement about her engagement and an instruction not to bother her. Nolan saw my face and asked what was wrong. I showed him the text. He read it twice, then handed my phone back without a word. But I saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not sadness, but something harder. Like the last little piece of him that still hoped Mom would come back and make everything okay had finally crumbled away. We didn't talk about it. There was work to do. Day 33 brought a new challenge. I was at the community center when a woman in a blazer walked in with a clipboard and an expression that meant business. She was from the county health department and she had questions. Someone had filed a complaint. Anonymous, she said. But someone had reported that I was distributing food without proper permits, without health inspections, without any of the official approvals that legitimate food operations required. My heart sank. I thought about everything I'd built over the past 3 weeks. The partnerships, the families counting on us, the volunteers who showed up every day. All of it could disappear because of one complaint. The health inspector, whose name was Dorothy Reeves, wasn't unkind. She could see what we were doing was good. But rules were rules. If I wanted to continue, I needed proper permits, a certified kitchen space, and official nonprofit status. The cost? Roughly $500 in fees, plus finding a commercial kitchen to operate from. She gave me 2 weeks. 2 weeks to find $500 when I could barely keep the lights on at home. 2 weeks to find a commercial kitchen when I didn't even have a working stove at our apartment. 2 weeks to make everything official when I was still technically just a kid trying not to drown. I thanked Dorothy Reeves for the information and somehow held myself together until she left. Then I sat down on the community center steps and tried very hard not to panic. Mr. Okonkwo found me there 20 minutes later. He sat down beside me, his old knees creaking in protest, and asked what was wrong. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said that obstacles were just opportunities wearing ugly masks. He said that every successful person he'd ever known had faced moments exactly like this one. Moments where giving up seemed like the only logical choice. The ones who succeeded were the ones who found another way. I didn't have $500, but I had something else. I had a story. The next day, I called the local newspaper. Jasmine Torres was a young reporter at the Riverside Gazette, hungry for stories that mattered. When I told her about what we were doing, about the abandoned teenager who had turned food waste into community meals, she practically sprinted to the community center to interview me. The article ran the following week with the headline, "Teen Turns Tragedy into Triumph. Local food rescue feeds dozens." The response was immediate. Donations started pouring in. $5 here, $20 there, $100 from someone who wanted to remain anonymous. Within a week, we had over $2,000. Enough for permits, for fees, for everything we needed. But more than money, we had attention. People were sharing the article on social media. Local businesses were reaching out to partner with us. The mayor's office called to express support. And someone at the community center suggested we needed an official name. After much debate, Nolan wanted to call it Food Avengers, which I had to veto for legal reasons. We settled on Second Chance Kitchen, because that's what we were giving people, and that's what life had given me. What I didn't know was that the article had reached further than our little town. It had reached all the way to Canada, and it had set something in motion that would bring everything to a head in ways I never could have predicted. The television interview happened on day 44. Channel 7 News had picked up the story from the newspaper article, and suddenly I was sitting in a real studio with real cameras and a real news anchor asking me questions about my life. I'd never been so nervous. The makeup lady tried to cover the bags under my eyes, and she needed a lot of concealer. I told her I hadn't slept properly in 44 days. She just quietly added more powder and wished me luck. If you're still with me at this point of the story, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. It truly means everything to me and helps more than you know. Now let me tell you what happened next, because this is where everything changed. The interview aired that evening. The anchor, a polished woman named Rebecca Stanton, had done her research. She didn't just ask about Second Chance Kitchen. She asked about how it all started, about my mother leaving, about the $30, about everything. I hadn't planned to tell the whole truth. I'd prepared vague answers about difficult circumstances and family challenges. But sitting there under those bright lights, something shifted. I thought about Nolan at home watching. I thought about all the people we'd helped who had their own stories of struggle and survival. I thought about how silence protects the people who hurt us. So I told the truth, all of it. I said that my mother had left for Canada with her boyfriend on July 3rd. I said she'd given us $30 and a bottle of water for the entire summer. I said she'd blocked my calls and sent one text in 6 weeks, not to check on us, but to announce her engagement. I said that everything I'd built had come from desperation, not inspiration. The anchor's face shifted as I spoke. I could see the crew behind the cameras exchanging glances. This wasn't the feel-good story they'd expected. This was something rawer. The segment aired that night with a new headline, "Abandoned, Teen Creates Food Empire While Mother Vacations in Canada." By morning, the story had gone viral, not just locally, nationally. News outlets were picking it up, sharing it, commenting on it. My phone exploded with notifications, interview requests, messages of support from strangers across the country. Second Chance Kitchen received more donations in 24 hours than we'd received in the entire previous month. A local business owner, Mr. Fitzgerald, who ran a catering company, offered us use of his commercial kitchen for free. Our permit applications were fast-tracked by the county. We officially became a registered nonprofit with tax-exempt status. 12 restaurants were now partnering with us. We were feeding over 80 families every week. Volunteers were signing up faster than we could train them. But the story had also reached Canada. My mother called on day 46. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. She was furious, not apologetic, not concerned, furious. Her voice was shaking with rage as she demanded to know how I could embarrass her like this. Boyd's family had seen the news story. His business partners had seen it. Everyone was asking questions about what kind of woman abandons her children. I listened to her rant for almost 5 minutes without saying a word. When she finally paused for breath, I said one thing. "You left us with $30 for nearly 2 months." She sputtered something about me being dramatic, about exaggerating, about not understanding adult relationships. Then she announced she was coming home immediately to fix this mess and set the record straight. She hung up before I could respond. I should have felt scared. Instead, I felt something closer to peace. Let her come. Let her see what we'd built. Let her face the truth she'd been running from. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the news story had caught the attention of more than just my mother. Mrs. Pritchard, my gossipy neighbor who had become an unlikely volunteer, had been carrying a secret for weeks. Back when she was still just the neighborhood busybody, she'd been the one who filed the anonymous complaint with the health department. She'd been skeptical of what I was doing, worried about health risks, maybe a little jealous of the attention I was getting. But as she watched me work, watched me struggle, watched me pour everything into helping people, something changed in her. Guilt, maybe, or genuine admiration. Whatever it was, it pushed her to do something else. 3 weeks before the news story aired, Mrs. Pritchard had called Child Protective Services, not to hurt me, to help. She'd reported that an 11-year-old child had been left without a proper guardian for over a month. She'd provided dates, details, everything she'd observed, and CPS had opened an investigation. They couldn't do much while my mother was in Canada, out of their jurisdiction, but they'd been watching, waiting, building a case. When the news story confirmed everything, including my mother's location and her plans to return, they coordinated with local police. Day 47, the day my mother's plane landed. I was at home with Nolan when we heard the cars pull up. Multiple cars. I looked out the window and saw 2 police cruisers and an unmarked sedan parked in front of our house. My first thought was that something had gone wrong with Second Chance Kitchen. A permit issue, a complaint, something I'd overlooked. I told Nolan to stay inside and walked out to meet them. The officer in charge, a tall man with kind eyes named Sergeant Morrison, asked if I was Kristen Harrison. I said yes. He asked if my mother was expected home today. I said yes, she should be arriving any minute. Then he explained why they were there. Child abandonment, neglect of a minor, failure to provide adequate care for a dependent. These were serious charges, he said, and they needed to speak with my mother as soon as she arrived. I stood on my front porch and processed this information. My mother was about to be questioned by police for what she'd done to us, not because I'd reported her, I hadn't, but because someone else had seen the truth and refused to stay silent. 20 minutes later, a taxi pulled up to the curb. My mother stepped out looking like she'd just left a resort. Tanned, relaxed, designer sunglasses perched on her head. She had 2 new suitcases, expensive ones, probably gifts from Boyd. She was already composing her face into an expression of righteous anger, ready to storm in and take control. Then she saw the police cars. Her steps slowed, her expression shifted from anger to confusion to something approaching fear. She looked at the officers, then at me, then back at the officers. Sergeant Morrison approached her calmly and explained who he was and why he was there. I watched my mother's face cycle through a dozen emotions: shock, denial, outrage, panic. She tried to argue, tried to explain, tried to spin her vacation as something reasonable, But then she made the mistake of looking past the officers, past me, toward the community center 2 blocks away. There was a banner hanging above the entrance now, Second Chance Kitchen, serving our community. And beneath it, a photo of me and Nolan smiling. She stared at that banner for a long, silent moment. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. I wasn't the scared 18-year-old she'd left behind. I was standing tall, healthy, confident. Nolan appeared beside me, not hiding, not crying, but standing with his shoulders back like someone who had learned his own worth. We weren't broken. We weren't desperate. We weren't the mess she'd left behind. We were survivors. We were thriving, and she had missed all of it. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her designer luggage sat forgotten in the street. Her fairy tale summer had ended, and real life was waiting. The officers asked her to come with them to answer some questions. She went. What choice did she have? I watched the police car drive away with my mother in the back seat, and I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a quiet, profound sense of peace. Whatever happened next, we had already won. The investigation took 3 weeks. Child Protective Services interviewed me, Nolan, neighbors, Mr. Okonkwo, and half the community. They documented everything. The $30, the blocked phone calls, the single text message about the engagement, the 47 days of absence. My mother hired a lawyer, of course. Boyd had given her money before he disappeared from her life. Oh yes, Boyd. Apparently, his wealthy family wanted nothing to do with that kind of publicity. The engagement was called off approximately 6 hours after the news story aired. Funny how fast fairy tales crumble when reality shows up uninvited. In the end, my mother wasn't arrested. The charges were serious, but she had no prior record, and the court took into account that Nolan hadn't been physically harmed. She received 3 years of probation, mandatory parenting classes, and 200 hours of community service. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. When the judge asked where she would complete her community service, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I offered to let her work at Second Chance Kitchen. People thought I was crazy. Mr. Okonkwo asked if I was sure, his eyes full of concern. Even Nolan looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Why would I want my mother anywhere near what I'd built? But here's what I understood that others didn't. Punishment wasn't going to change her. Jail time wasn't going to make her a better person. The only way she would ever understand what she'd done was if she saw it, if she lived it, if she spent 200 hours surrounded by the community that had supported her children when she wouldn't. The judge approved the arrangement. My mother's first day of community service was awkward beyond description. She showed up in clothes that were too nice for sorting vegetables, her hair perfectly styled, her expression a mixture of humiliation and resentment. The volunteers who knew our story gave her looks that could freeze water. She didn't say a word to anyone, but community service has a way of wearing down walls. Week after week, she showed up. She sorted bread alongside Mrs. Pritchard, who, I'd learned, had been the one to call CPS in the first place. She packaged meals next to Mr. Okonkwo, who treated her with firm but fair expectations. She served food to families who thanked her without knowing who she was. And slowly, something began to shift. I noticed it first in small ways. She stopped styling her hair for service days. She started asking questions about how things worked. She learned the names of regular volunteers. She began arriving early instead of exactly on time. Week 6, she broke down crying during a shift. We were in the back room, just the two of us, boxing up meals for delivery. Out of nowhere, she started sobbing. Ugly, messy sobs that she tried to hide behind her hands. When she finally caught her breath, she looked at me with red eyes and said something I'd waited my whole life to hear. I'm sorry. Not I'm sorry, but not I'm sorry you felt that way. Just those 2 words, raw and undefended. She said she'd spent her whole life looking for someone to take care of her. After my father left, she'd been so desperate to find that security again that she'd forgotten she was supposed to be the one providing it. She said she'd convinced herself we were fine, that I was mature enough to handle things, that her happiness mattered too. She said she'd been selfish and wrong and she didn't expect me to forgive her. I didn't forgive her. Not that day. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a door you open slowly, checking for traps along the way. But I told her the door wasn't locked. That was 6 months ago. Today, Second Chance Kitchen operates out of a real commercial kitchen donated by Mr. Fitzgerald, whose catering business became our biggest supporter. We partner with 23 restaurants across the city. We serve over 200 families every week. We have a staff of 4 paid employees and over 40 regular volunteers. I received a full scholarship to State University for social entrepreneurship. Classes start next fall. Nolan is thriving in school. He wrote an essay about our summer that won a county-wide writing competition. The kid has a future in storytelling, which makes sense. He lived a pretty incredible one. As for my mother, she completed her community service months ago. She still volunteers twice a week. She's not perfect. We're not the kind of family you see in commercials, laughing over breakfast and hugging at every opportunity. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. But she's trying, really trying. She started therapy. She got a steady job. She stopped looking for a man to rescue her and started figuring out how to rescue herself. Last week, she asked if she could take Nolan to a movie, just the 2 of them. He said yes. Progress comes in small steps. I still have that empty water bottle, by the way, the one she left us with on July 3rd. I keep it on my desk where I can see it every day, not out of bitterness. I'm past that now. I keep it as a reminder that sometimes the people who should lift you up are the ones who leave you down. A reminder that rock bottom isn't the end of the story. It's just the foundation you build on. A reminder that $30 and a bottle of water can become something extraordinary if you refuse to give up. My mother saw police cars and news cameras and a daughter she didn't recognize. But what made her gasp wasn't the trouble she was in. It was realizing that we didn't need her anymore, that we'd built something beautiful out of the nothing she'd left behind, that her absence had given us the one thing she never could, the chance to discover who we really were. Some lessons cost more than others, but some lessons are worth every penny. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next story.